Guys, welcome to a classic film review of 1960s A League of Gentlemen. Now, I feel like I've seen the plot of this film recycled a few times over the years. We've got a disgruntled war veteran who gathers a team of former soldiers to pull an audacious heist to get what they feel is owed to them. But it's probably never been done with the lightness of step that this Basil Dearden movie has, where Jack Hawkins gathers a group of disgraced military colleagues to perform a bank robbery using their military training to execute it. Now, this British classic was released the same year as the Rat Pack vehicle Ocean's 11, and as a comparison, it's great to see how different the two are. Obviously, The League of Gentlemen's ever so British in many ways, and was actually quite daring at the time in a few more ways, as we'll discuss. Let's take a look.
Elections will be covered for 5 minutes after we leave, so I hope you'll all behave sensibly. But just to impress upon you the need of caution...
Now, if you're familiar at all with heist movies, you'll recognise the basic plot mechanics here. The putting the team together stage, the preparation and planning, the actual heist itself. Usually in these kinds of films, my favourite parts are seeing the planning and preparation, and that's probably the case here too. First up, we have Jack Hawkins here in his final leading role. His health was rapidly declining throughout the 60s. He gathers together here a team by sending them copies of a crime paperback called The Golden Fleece, a book apparently detailing the robbery, along with half £5 notes and an unsigned invitation to a lunch meeting. Very mysterious. His theory is that if a group of military guys approaches a heist with the same discipline as they would approach a military operation, then there would be a near guaranteed success. So among the guys he gathers are Nigel Patrick as Race, the kind of second in command, and Richard Attenborough as Lexi. Now, all these men have some kind of personal issues or have been downtrodden by society, enough to warrant their desire to perform a lucrative heist. And it's even insinuated that one of the crew is, shock horror, a gay man, which from the future director of the ahead of its time Victim isn't handled in the most tactful of ways.
Well, press on. I wonder what time lights are out in the dorm.
I don't know about you lot, but I'm going to keep my lights on all night.
And the less said about a bizarre mid-film cameo from a 22-year-old Oliver Reed, the better. His tiny part as a camp gay stereotype at a theatre is jarring and ill-judged, probably not doing himself or the film many favours.
He was dancing principal and I was... charming.
Can I help you? We've got this room until 3.
Isn't this Babes in the Woods?
But anyway, it's not long before the gang is united and sets up residence in a large secluded house. And here we get to see all the preparations, including a great mid-film heist of an army barracks, necessitating Roger Livesey's priest with a dodgy past to pose as a high-ranking officer, create a diversion and performing a fake inspection of the base. It's my favourite sequence in the movie, really, with a great balance of misdirection and tension and comedy. A quick shout out here, of course, to Bryan Forbes, who not only wrote the screenplay for the film, but also plays smooth-talking gigolo Port Hill.
Great Cliff Gardens. Thank you, sir. Don't tip him, I took care of it.
You took care of me.
Forbes, of course, would go on to direct great films like The L-Shaped Room, International Velvet and The Stepford Wives. His screenplay here is more interested in the interactions between the characters than any actual heisting. Now, Jack Hawkins' Colonel Hyde has spent more than a year working out the details of stealing trunks of used notes that are delivered to a bank in the middle of London each week. Now, his plan involves smoke screens, electrical malfunctions and the threat of force, with each member of the team having a specific task and, being ex-military men, they are, of course, well disciplined. Now, modern audience members who are well trained to spot a plot twist will identify the exact moment and mistake made that will come back to bite the robbers in the third act. Of course, this being a heist movie, events don't always run smoothly, and of course there's an 11th hour spanner in the works. Unfortunately for the film, this comes in the form of Robert Coote, who arrives as an uninvited guest to a post-robbery party.
Right, just wondering what the party was made of. Mind you, never needed any excuse myself. Oh, I say, Norman. Do you remember that Christmas in Hamburg? Oh, that was one for the book, eh? That'll go down in history, that one.
Whose hysterics not only threaten to derail the escape, but also the entire movie. So as usual with films from this era, the biggest draw for me is how of its time it is. The stiff upper lip Britishness of post-war 1950s England was soon to give way to the 60s, and this film obviously straddles both decades, a kind of symbolic final throw of the dice for these veterans of the Second World War. Now, the film as a whole seems to have much fun at the expense of the British Army. There's even a brief hint at the crew hanging the blame of their barracks raid on the IRA, the scene being inspired partly by a real IRA raid when their members impersonated officers and stole weapons from a military barrack. Now, a huge reason why The League of Gentlemen is so entertaining is because of its casting. Its abundance of British stars, each getting their own snippet of backstory and each bringing his own qualities to the party. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Jack Hawkins was ill with what would eventually be diagnosed as throat cancer during filming, and was ill enough for production to be shut down for several days. After the film wrapped, he underwent cobalt therapy. Now, director Basil Dearden filmed this film between his social issue classics like Violent Playground, Sapphire and Victim. Here he assembles a mostly tight robbery thriller, which became one of the hits of the 60s. You can see why he went for it though, as it's got quite sad undertones showing these disgraced heroes, whether rejected by society or having struggles at home, but all similarly struggling with a post-war lifestyle.
Run some more hot in for me, will you?
I'm your husband, not your bloody Batman, you know. There is such a word as please.
Please? Oh, poor Rupert Bear, he's all upset. Now say you're sorry like a good little bear.
And one of the joys of the film is seeing this bunch of strangers form a genuine bond by the end of the movie, drawn together by a nostalgia for the structure and simplicity of their old military days. Well, that and the promise of £100,000 apiece. The robbery itself, although highlighting hilariously flimsy security by today's standards, is a bit of a visual treat. Once the smoke bombs are detonated, we have our crew spotting gas masks and automatic weapons emerging from a fog. So a few minutes ago I mentioned the film was released in the same year as Sinatra led his crew across the Las Vegas robbery spree in Ocean's 11, which I'm a fan of. However, that film is almost too glitzy and happy-go-lucky, and it lacks the gravity found in The League of Gentlemen. Now, this isn't a tale about living the high life. This is a story of men rediscovering their purpose, a generation with one more opportunity for adventure, and one where I suspect the camaraderie of the group makes the financial gains secondary. Go check it out.
Now, any criticisms as to the way the robbery was organised?
You asking me? Well, I thought it was quite original.
That's all?
Yes, that's all.